time.
Here we go. Another Square Dance Callers Talking. Tonight, I'm talking to a gentleman. He's currently in New Mexico. He is from Texas. I'm going to let him do some talking tonight. This is a gentleman I met a while back from New Mexico. Tonight, I have Vernon Jones. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fine, Charlie. How are you doing?
I'm doing very good. Like I was saying, you're currently in New Mexico. Just let's get started on that real quick. What you doing in New Mexico?
Okay, well, Kayla, my wife, and I left home Tuesday and traveling to New Mexico and stopped off at Tucumcari for no dadgum reason other than just to stay there, and stayed at a motel that was a big motel back in the Route 66 days, and got a bit of 50s and 60s nostalgia, and then came into Albuquerque on Wednesday and called at the USA West Convention on Wednesday all day Thursday and Friday. And then Friday, after my last calling stint, we left there and came up here to Red River in New Mexico, where we started a 4-day calling stint, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday up here in at the Red River Community Center. And when that's over with, Wednesday, we'll head back to Texas, where the heat is 104 degrees, and right now here in Red River, New Mexico, it's 71.
Wow, that'll be quite the change for you. Now you're you live in Texas now, right?
Born and raised.
Born and raised. Fantastic. Whereabouts in Texas?
Well, I tell everybody it's the Dallas-Fort Worth area because nobody's ever heard of the small town that we live in. We actually live in a town called Springtown, which is about 40 miles northwest of Fort Worth.
Okay. That's awesome. The Lone Star say born and raised. That's fantastic, man.
Yeah.
I've spent a little time in Texas, a couple of different places. I've driven through parts of Texas. And you really don't understand. If people told me you don't know how big it is until you drive through it. And you just drive and drive and drive, and it's still Texas and Texas and Texas. It's a great place. Love being out there. We've been down to San Antonio, of course, like most, Houston, been into Dallas a couple of times. But I'd like to explore it a little more, and we've got a couple of conventions coming up that we're going to be in Grapevine for. So I'm looking forward to that. Good. Absolutely.
Good. Yeah, it's a big place. Matter of fact, it's a proven fact. Most everybody has heard of the town El Paso, Texas. Mm-hmm. And if both of us were in El Paso and I started driving to Dallas and you started driving to California, you would beat me.
That is big. Gosh. Oh, all right. So you're a square dance caller. How long have you been square dance calling?
I started calling in 1978, and I believe my math is not, was that 45 years, I think.
Yes, sir. Dead on. 45 years. Now, obviously, you started dancing prior to, when did you start square dancing? When was that brought into your life?
Well, when was square dancing brought into my life? My father is a caller, mm-hmm. John Jones, and so square dancing has been a part of my life ever since I can remember. I started actually square dancing while I was in junior high in 1973. Now then, just funny things about that. When you in 1973 and you were in junior high and square dancing, that's not something that you told your fellow students about, because that's the kind of thing that would get you beat up. But but there was about 6 or 7 of us in junior high, both boys and girls, that were square dancing at the time. And we danced 2 or 3 years. And then, of course, when we got into high school, activities got in the way, right, and that shut that down. And while in high school, I met my wife, and we dated all through high school and such. And then as I graduated from high school, and then a year later she did, and then she went to college. And then all of a sudden just popped up and said she wanted to try to learn square dancing. So we took lessons again, basically so she could relearn. I knew it, and we've been doing it ever since.
Very nice. So she takes lessons, y'all are dancing, and then you decide, of course, with your father, your dad calling, you decided to start calling. About how old were you when you first started doing your singing calls? I imagine that's where you started.
That's where everybody starts.
Yeah.
In 1978, I would have been 20 years old, and really, we were dancing at the time, and I did not have no inkling and no determination to be a caller. And Kayla and I weren't married, and another couple that was learning to dance and also learning to call invited us out to their lake house that their parents had, and he brought his equipment, and he was learning a few singing calls, and so he thought it would be a good kind of a fun thing if he got him and his future wife and I and Kayla and learned the singing call "It's a Sin to Tell a Lie." And so we spent all weekend learning that. And then the next Tuesday at the lessons that we were taking that Dad was teaching, well, we sang the singing call "It's a Sin to Tell a Lie," and that's the first singing call I ever did, and that was in 1978.
It's a sin to tell a lie. I have to look that up. That's nice.
Yeah, it's on Blue Star.
Blue Star. So obviously you enjoyed it, really started calling. So you start working on pattern and everything. Of course, you've got a big hand up with your dad, but who were some of the other influences when you started out calling?
Well, during that period of time, of course, other than Dad, the biggies were Ken Bauer and Wade Driver. Mm-hmm. Now then, a shout out to both of them. When I was learning to call, everybody wanted to be Wade Driver. And he was, had established his rhythm records and was probably the closest thing to a Tom Jones type entertainer that square dancing had at that time. And so, as a matter of fact, I knew I was probably doing pretty good with calling. It wasn't too long after that I started that Dad was calling a dance for a club over in Dallas. And he said, "Hey, if you'll go with me, I'll let you do a singing call while there." And so I did, and he let me do one, and I can't even remember what one it was. But on the way back, I was waiting for the ever expecting critique that I knew was coming. And when he started talking, he said one of the things was, "Well, Vernon, when you called your singing call tonight, I heard a lot of Wade Driver in the way that you were calling." And I thought to myself, well, that must be pretty good. If I'm sounding like Wade Driver, I must be doing something right or going down the right track anyway. And so he was a big influence on me wanting to call. But I cannot sing enough praises about Ken Bauer. Ken Bauer was the damn nearest coolest caller I ever heard in my life. He was the first square dance caller that I ever heard sing a rock and roll song at a square dance, because back then everything was country and western music, and he's recorded and sang "Rockin' Pneumonia" and "Boogie Woogie Flu," and I think that was just the coolest thing I'd ever heard at that time. And to this day, nobody, as far as I'm concerned, can pop a floor and excite a floor any quicker than Ken Bauer could and still does.
And I've only got to see those guys, whether it be at a national convention lately that I've been going to, or some videos that somebody's posted on YouTube or something. Absolute legends, Ken Bauer and Wade Driver for sure. Your dad, John Jones. I like the little bit that you can find of them, because there's, back then people didn't put up YouTube. There was no YouTube. And so some of that stuff is just gone forever. As far as getting to hear it and see it. But gosh, that was a great upbringing for you there. Gosh, Ken Bauer,
without a doubt.
Man. So you start calling, you got everything going pretty well. You start doing your own dances and all that. So when did you decide to start traveling around, and were there any memorable dances that stand out to you?
Well, back then, and that's something that new callers today don't don't appreciate and don't understand. Back then, if a club 200 miles away offered you $50 to come call for them, well, then you went and did those kinds of things. When I was learning to call, fortunately for me in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, there were many clubs and dancing every night of the week. And of course, you know how it is. You go to a club and you hope that you get asked to call a guest tip or a guest half tip or whatever. And so you went and did those every night that you could possibly go. There were so many clubs that were dancing in the area at the time that many of them danced on the same night. And this might not be the most ethical thing to admit to, but if I got to ask to call a guest tip early enough in the night, then I would secretly and quietly sneak out a door, hopefully unseen, and go to another club and hope to get to be asked to call another tip there.
Nothing wrong with that.
And that happened quite frequently. These days, those kinds of things are not as readily available, understandably. But you know, if there's one thing I can express to newer callers starting out, is to go as much as you can. As far as memorable dances are concerned, the first one, of course, is the first full dance that I got to call. And Daryl Lipscomb asked me to fill in for him at a night at a club in Fort Worth that he wasn't going to be at. And so that was the first dance that I ever called. And that was the first full dance. And that was in 1979 for the Fort Worth Single Club in Fort Worth, Texas. And so that was a memorable night. One of the other things that I remember back in those early years is I set up a couple of square dance weekends with Tony Oxendine, and he came into East Texas and to Dallas-Fort Worth, and we did a couple of weekends. And before we decided that we needed to go on and do other things, and the second weekend, I'm going to tell a story on him. He came in to do that particular dance, and I also asked Dad to be a part of that weekend. And so he was, and we had set up Friday afternoon, all the equipment, getting ready for the people to come in. And so we decided we'd practice a couple of songs. And for whatever reason, I can't remember exactly, somebody decided that the yak stack that I had was not facing in the proper direction. And so Tony reached over and turned it. And when he did, he offset the balance and knocked my yak stack over and hit my dad in the head. And if I'm lying, I'm flying, knocked him smooth out. And Dad's laying on the floor, not being able to talk. And Tony later in his in some of his storytelling thinks, oh my God, here I am just getting started out being a caller, and I've done killed John Jones.
He's never told me that story. I got to ask you. That's great.
Yeah, he'll tell it if you get him loose enough.
Oh my goodness. That is definitely a memorable dance for sure. Yeah, unfortunately, I missed out on the volume of square dancing that used to be out there. When I started just dancing, gosh, in 94-ish, 93, something like that. There were still some clubs, but I was in Savannah, Georgia, and there was just a handful around us, and it wasn't as big.
Sure.
But I would go to Macon, Georgia for the state convention, and I'd see a bunch of people, which you don't see as much now, obviously. But
right.
Yeah, so, and I've talked to a lot of people, and I really wish I could have seen that when, like you're saying, I mean, you can go from one club to the next on the same night.
Right.
Wow. Great memories.
Yeah, to give you an example of those days, it was along those same year lines, 79, 80, 81, something of that nature, that the local dance association called the North Texas Square and Round Dance Association has their annual festival in the fall, and they call it the North Tex Roundup. And this particular year that I'm thinking of, they had Ken Bauer for both Friday and Saturday night, and then had Marshall Flippo come in for Saturday night, and of course with Ken calling also on Saturday. And on Saturday night, they had two halls And get ready for this. Each hall had 100 squares on each side.
Gosh, that is truly amazing.
It was, we didn't think it would ever end back then, but it's hard to fathom that kind of dance program and festival these days.
Gosh. Yeah, I mean, if you're at a national convention or a decent sized state convention and you see 20 squares, you're just like, oh my gosh, look at all those people out there.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep.
I've seen pictures when something pops up on Facebook or something with, 60, 70, 80 squares. You're just like, wow, how do you even call it something like that? Yeah, 2 halls with 100 each. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was.
Of all, what are the levels you call at?
Well, I call SSD, which is I am a super proponent of. And then of course basic, mainstream, plus, and advanced, and I don't go any further than that.
Okay.
I've just never had the desire, I'm not belittling anything or want to sound like I'm disparaging against challenge. I just never had the desire to try to learn that, so I just never had.
Yeah, I just finished a class. I think we only had 4 in the class, but we did that. The club wanted to do SSD program, so we're just finished that. Actually, I think we've got 1 more week of it, but we've gone through all the calls already. And I really enjoy calling it now for the club. I didn't know. I mean, I knew about it. Obviously, it's just a few less calls than the mainstream, and but I've gotten a lot more creative using SSD in the few weeks that we've been doing it now. So I'm really taking a good look at it. We're going to try and do another class here in about 3 more months, I think. So one of the club sets it up. But do enjoy that. And I've never gone into advanced. I've danced it a few times, but I don't call it. Of all those with SSD and mainstream and plus, do you have a favorite call?
My favorite call, yes, cross runs.
Cross runs.
Cross runs. You can do so much with cross runs, and they're easy to do once the dancers get used to doing them. And of course, there's one reason dancers are not used to doing them, and that's because callers don't call them for whatever reason. But all the other calls I thoroughly enjoy. But with cross runs and runs, I can create a figure 8 type dancer movement, which I think is the quintessential flow pattern that square dancing needs to be in, and create a good dance flow experience for the dancers, and it be easily achievable and enjoyable.
You're the first one to bring up cross runs, and that makes a lot of sense. And really, the only time you do hear it on most callers, if you're just to get out of Dixie style because they want to come out of the left hand. So you'll hear boys cross run. And but I've started putting them in a little more often. And it's just that you got to kind of set the dancers up sometimes, since they don't hear it all the time. Call a cross run just cold, you're gonna break a couple down. So, but yeah, that's a really good point. I like that.
Well, thank you.
So you were calling for a while. You've recorded some music. I know. I don't know if it's your latest one. I don't know. I did just buy it, Sitting on the Dock of the Bay.
Yes.
I really like that song. I picked that one up probably a week ago. What are some of the other singing calls that you've recorded?
Oh, geez, I started recording for Blue Star back when Norman Murbaugh still owned it, and in Houston, Texas. Of course, he was the originator of Blue Star. And the very first thing I did was More Than I Can Say by Leo Sayer, I think is the name. And I recorded several singing calls for Blue Star. One of the most favorite ones was a Hank Williams medley, a Hank Williams Sr. Medley. And then I also recorded a Hank Williams Sr. and Hank Williams Jr. combined medley. And so that was a lot of fun. After Blue Star, I recorded a few for Global Records, and those were good. And one of the favorite one for Global was What This Country Needs. Is a little more steel guitar, which is a anthem for we need more hard driving country music.
Yeah.
Not that I don't disagree with that. It's just I do believe that, and I enjoy the variety of different styles of music that square dance music is coming in from now. And then I have recorded for Desert Gold, got to record one for them with Dad and my stepmother. This is going to shock some people. My stepmother, Deborah Carroll Jones, recorded that, and it was called No Bad News from the musical The Wiz. And then a few years ago, of course, Scott Bennett started Crest and Acme and Peak Recordings, and he was trying to get into the genre of 70s rock and roll, which I think he's done very well.
Very well.
And some other folks have joined in and started doing the same type, and recorded several with him, especially some really cool blues songs, one by J.J. Cale and some others. And then we recorded It Don't Come Easy by Ringo Starr, which was real good. And then, of course, Scott came up with the idea of redoing Dock of the Bay, and dadgum nearly the original style that it was done with.
Yes, it was.
And which I thoroughly enjoyed, and that was the last one I've done, and can't wait to do another one at some point.
That is very nice. Yeah. I'll have to look and find the Hank Williams Senior and Junior stuff. I really like I've always liked Hank Senior and Junior, and I'll have to look into that. I've never heard it. I've never listened and found it, but I will find it. So you got the music. Do you have a favorite singing call of all those? I know I try not to get that, because I mean, if you were going to come to a club right now and I said, "Hey, Vernon, just go up there and do a singing call," what would you think you'd do?
Without a doubt, I'm not saying I'm the best singer in the world, but I can carry a tune at times. But if I was just cold on the spot, go up and do a singing call, without a doubt, it's going to be Pride and Joy on Royal. I love that. I was helping doing a caller school several years ago, and Jerry Story, God rest his soul, was one of the coaches, along with several of us, and he gave me an advanced copy of it before it was even released, and so I learned it, and I love it. It's a different from a country and western. As a matter of fact, it's from a Texas boy, Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Stevie Ray Vaughan, yep.
People said, "No, yeah, that kind of music will never work," and boy, are they ever wrong. It's a great singing call. It's a great driving singing call. People like it. People my age and your age and today's dancers recognize it, and then it never fails that I get somebody more than one at most times come up and say, "Thank you for doing that. I can't believe that's a square dance singing call." And Stevie Ray was one of my favorite entertainers, and it's just a feel good song that I can do at a drop of a hat.
Pride and Joy, yes, sir. I really like Stevie Ray Vaughan. Gosh,
I do too.
I feel Voodoo Child's one. I mean, I could listen to that over and over. It's a great song. On that note, if you're not listening to square dance music, what music are you listening to if you're riding around?
My go-to is and will always remain Southern rock. I just love those guys and love the style that they do. I love slide guitars. I love two and triple guitars playing at the same time and harmonics. I just love that style, and I do everything that I can square dance wise if it's a Southern rock song. Now then, I grew up of course listening to country music, of course, but the Beatles were an early influence. And on my Sirius radio, I've got the Beatles channels tuned in.
Okay.
I've also got the Grateful Dead channel turned in right next to it. But one of the things that I got to grow up with in early junior high and high school and college was the progressive country music, that phenomenon that went on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Willie Nelson came into prominence. Now, then Willie Nelson was around way before then, but it was the early 70s and middle 70s when he really became popular, not singing any different music than he had been singing, just because he grew his hair long and grew a beard. Everybody decided he was cool. And of course, Waylon Jennings is in the same boat. But one of the guys that I listened to that really caught my eye was Jerry Jeff Walker, the guy that wrote Mr. Bojangles.
Yep.
And he was part of that movement, and I thoroughly loved the music that he put out and the stories that he told. And then people who know me well will think I've lost my mind if I don't mention Leon Russell, which was the greatest, as far as I'm concerned, rock and roll pianist that ever lived. As a matter of fact, he's rated number 6 as the greatest rock and roll pianist in a poll done by Rolling Stone. And the 5 guys that are ahead of him all list Leon Russell as better than they are. And so he could bring people up just with the motion of a hand and then send them flying into a frenzy faster than it, just like Ken Bauer could do on a square dance floor.
Okay. I did. Well, I wasn't thinking about it, but when you mentioned it, so you've done a lot of teaching with GSI that I've seen. I'm sure you've probably done some other stuff too, but since I've taken several of GSI schools, I've seen you. And earlier you had some advice for new callers, mid-level callers. I mean, guys starting out or whatever. You have any other advice just for callers?
Yes, continue to learn. None of us will ever get to the point where we shouldn't learn something. It amazes me today, even in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we'll bring in a clinician like Tony Oxendine, and very few compared. We're lucky; we still have a pretty good size local callers association of about 20 people. And Tony Oxendine will give a free seminar, and 5 people will show up. And good for those 5 or 6 that do show up, because we'll all learn something. But so many callers today, new and also experienced, just don't put in the effort to practice their craft, improve their craft. And it's really a shame. And one of the best examples I can give is that callers today will say, well, I've been calling for 30 years. I don't need any more experience. In big time business, in big time, I'm talking about AT&T and some of the really big companies, they change CEOs pretty regularly. And the reason they do that, for the most part, is because over the years, people have discovered that when you say you have 30 years experience, that's really not true. What you have is 10 years of experience that you've just repeated 3 times. And so as experienced callers who've been calling for years, I don't suggest, I heavily emphasize, never stop the opportunity and never stop practicing and trying to learn something new. It's always good for us, and we should always continue to do that.
Thank you for saying that. It does, I picked up on that a while back, because like I said, I think I've been to the last 4 GSI schools. I try and take a separate school throughout the year if there's something around me. Of course, any seminar that you can jump in on that's like a day thing, that's great too.
Sure.
just like you said, and I'm still blown away when I go to the GSI schools. I see some callers that have been calling for 20, 30 years, and they still take the class. And they go through the whole 3 days, just like I'm going through 3.5 days or whatever. And because you have to, because somebody who's never sat and spoke with you, you're going to throw something out that they've never thought of or heard of.
Certainly.
That's one of the bonuses with the GSI and all the other schools. There's people that you've never had time to just spend time with, and you get that. And you've got to learn. That's the same thing I tell dancers. If you want to be a good square dancer, you've got to go dance to somebody besides me or besides your club caller. If you dance to your club caller for 10 years, you can be a good dancer, but you're not going to be better than you are. You're going to do exactly what that guy said. You bring in, you go to conventions and what have you, you hear a bunch of different callers, and you're going to be a better dancer based on that. Same thing with the schools.
You're exactly right. That's one of the things that we tried to do here in Texas, and we've had some pretty good success. As we wanted to start a new dancer festival. We call it the Texas Fiesta, and we are modeling it on the great success that the European Callers and Teachers Association have had with their student hoedown, where they have a hoedown that's geared towards new dancers. And we've had 3 of them across the state, and it's for the sole fact that, I hate to I'm not bad mouthing anybody, but we all know that when we go to festivals or weekends or whatever, and if new dancers want to go, well, then they have a new dancer hall, and that new dancer hall may only be for 2 hours during the entire weekend, and it's usually stuck in some out of the way place that's hard to find.
Yeah.
And, new dancers come away with a feeling of, gee, we're not in the upper echelon yet. And so these new dancer festivals, these Texas Fiestas that we have started, glorify, and the spotlight is on the new dancers for the sheer fact, if nothing else, the reason we're doing that is to give them something where they are the spotlight of the weekend and not some room out of the way in a darkened hall somewhere, but also to give them the opportunity to dance to somebody other than their local caller who they learned from, because you and I and other callers will have to admit that if a group of dancers learn from you, Charlie, and I come in to call, and I say circle left, well, the first thing that goes through their mind is that's not the way Charlie says it. And so, they have to get used to that kind of thing. And so it's critical that we do that for new dancers and give them variety and opportunity.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that's one of my examples. I tell, whether it's a class that I'm teaching or if I go to a club dance somewhere else, somebody hires me, I will tell them, me saying square through 4 is completely different from another guy from Georgia saying square through 4. With the rhythm that I'm going to use or whatever. So yeah, you got to get out there and dance. And callers, you have to listen to other callers. You got to go to schools. I listen to so much YouTube videos of callers that I know, that I don't know, and everything else. So that's a big help for the callers, Vernon. I appreciate that, man.
Certainly.
So with the square dancing, what I've tried to do with this also is I want to learn a little bit about you. I mean, we've had some time to talk after dances and after conventions, so we know each other a little bit. I do know that you're a big baseball fan. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, when you were talking about dancing in high school and everything, and you said that life gets in the way, did you play baseball growing up?
I absolutely, as early as I can remember. Just after walking, I played baseball and played all the way through high school and into college. And you mentioned high school. For 2 years during my sophomore and junior year in high school, I was a bat boy for the Texas Rangers baseball club. And they paid me a whopping $6 a game. And I probably averaged 4.5 to 5 hours at the ballpark, because it's not just picking up bats and this, that, and the other. There's other things before and after the game. So I would have done it for nothing. Now that I look back on it, considering those the people that I've met, the baseball superstars that I've met, and the Hall of Famers and all this kind of thing, and all the autographs that I've got.
Now, who just some of the names on those teams, because I've been a fan of baseball since I was a child. Who were some of the standouts from the Rangers those years you were bat boy?
The year that I started, the Rangers, who hadn't been the Rangers very long, they've only been in Texas since 1972, but before that, they were the Washington Senators, and they weren't very good up to that point. But in 1974 was the first full year Billy Martin was the manager, and I'm sure you'll recognize that name.
I did not know he was the manager. Okay.
Yeah, and they came in second place that year, only 5 games behind the Oakland Athletics, who went on to win the World Series, the second in a string of 3 consecutive World Series that they won. But that particular year, now then check this out. Billy Martin, of course, was the manager, and he was the manager of the year. And if you've never sat in the dugout behind Billy Martin when he's mouthing at both his players and the opposing players, that's a spectacle that needs to be seen and heard, because now I can't say everything that he said, but it was very entertaining. But on that particular team, they had Jeff Burroughs, who was the American League most valuable player that year.
Left field. Yep.
They had Ferguson Jenkins, Hall of Famer, who won 25 games that year and was the comeback player of the year. Had Mike Hargrove, who was the rookie of the year that year, and just had a phenomenal team of players, and some of them became friends. I'm going to tell a story about Ferguson Jenkins and the way baseball has changed. That particular year that he won 25 games, he led the league in complete games. And what that means is the pitcher starts the game and completely finishes the entire game. Now then, last year, the leader in complete games, and I don't remember the name, but he had 2. Ferguson Jenkins, the year he led the league in complete games, had 29. He started 33 games and completed 29 of them. And so that's the kind of pitcher that he was. And it was just a phenomenal year. Like I said, it was just one of those things that, although I got paid very little money, I would have done it for nothing.
Absolutely.
We got to go on 1 road trip a year with the team. Now then, the bat boy doesn't get to travel with the team. The home team furnishes the bat boy for the visiting team, but we did get to go on 1 road trip a year. And of course, if you didn't have an education, a life education before you went on the road with the baseball team, when you came back, you did have a life education. And we got to pick where we wanted to go, and so I picked Anaheim, California, to play the Angels, and then of course Oakland to play the Athletics, and then finished up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, for whatever reason, because it was in October and it was cold. But while in Oakland, we had an off day, and I had a friend who had moved to that area with his family. And so I wanted to go see him. And so I started asking some of the other ball players on the off day, I need to go rent a car. Mind you, I was 16 years old. And they said, oh yeah, there's a rent-a-car place right across the street from the hotel. So early the next morning, I got up and went over there and walked in the front door and said, I don't know what to do. I've never rented a car before. So what do I need to do? Well, you need this credit card and that credit card. You need to be 18 years of age. And I said, well, I'm only 16. They said, well, we can't rent a car to you. So dejectedly out the door I went. But what I did is I went out the building, walked around the building, came back in the same door. And instead of going to talking to that guy over at that desk, I went to this guy over at this desk. And I said, I play baseball for the Texas Rangers, and I'd like to rent a car. And I showed them my Texas Rangers employee card, and they said, what car do you want? never checked my age, never checked for a credit card, just gave me a car, full tank of gas, and said, see you in the morning, 7 o'clock, and away I went.
That is awesome story, man. Gosh.
And frankly, that story's not over, because I can't remember the town, but it was like 90 miles away. So of course, there wasn't GPSs back then. You had to follow maps. And so down there I went, picked him up, visited a while. And he said, hey, as it turns out, I'm flying back to Texas to visit some other folks in the family, and I'm taking the red eye out of San Francisco at 1 o'clock. Can you take me back? I said, sure. So up the other side of the bay, we went to San Francisco, and I dropped him off at the airport, said bye and all that kind of stuff. Now then, mind you, this was in 74, and this wasn't too long after Charles Manson, and people in California were weird and strange and crazy, because that's the stories we were getting. Mm-hmm. And I knew there were several bridges that crossed the bay back over into Oakland, but I'll be damned if I was going to stop and ask anybody. And so, but I knew how to drive 90 miles down one side of the bay and turn around and drive 90 miles back. And so that's what I did.
Gosh, Vernon, that's a hell of a story right there, buddy. Man. So pretty much most of your life, Texas Rangers fan. I have to ask you, probably growing up, I was a pitcher. And I could never throw hard. I was a left-handed, so I was good at getting people out. That's about it. Couldn't strike you out, but I could get you to hit into a ground ball. And I played through high school. Did you ever get to see Nolan Ryan pitch?
Get to see Nolan Ryan pitch? Yes, many times. Also, I helped play a prank on Nolan Ryan. Nolan Ryan, if you ever watched him, and if you've never seen the documentary Facing Nolan, you need to see that, because it's unbelievable.
I have seen it, yes, sir.
Unbelievable. But back then, of course, Nolan started in 68, 69, something like that. I can't remember. And he was pitching at the time for the California Angels. Mm-hmm. Now, then when he warms up, and, of course, pitchers throw several warm-up pitches, and then they throw it to the catcher, and the catcher throws it to second base and around the horn. The ball goes and all that kind of stuff. Well, he would walk off the mound on the third base side, walk a semicircle around the mound, catch the ball, and walk back up on the mound on the first base side. Did that every time he pitched, every time he warmed up. And that was, not a well-known thing, but all the ball players and people connected with baseball knew that. And so we decided to play a prank on him. And it was one of the other guys on the team, one of the other players, who instigated a starstruck, not very smart bat boy to go along with it. And so he brought a rubber snake and a rubber lizard, and I mean big ones. And as the Rangers were the first ones off the field after the first half inning, well, I ran out to the pitcher's mound acting like I needed to do something, and I put the rubber snake down on the first base side, and he put the rubber lizard down on the third base side. And of course, Nolan didn't know it walking up, but after he finished his warm-up pitches, he did notice it. And we both got fined by Major League Baseball a day's salary. Of course, his day's salary was probably like $200 and mine was $6. So, but it was still a funny and great thing to do.
We didn't talk about that beforehand, and when I was thinking all week, I see you on Facebook at the Texas Rangers games and all that.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, man, has he ever seen Nolan Ryan? I had no idea you had that kind of contact. Gosh, yeah. That's good, Vernon. That is so good.
Charlie, I could spend a 2-hour session with you talking about baseball. So anytime you get ready.
Well, we are going to do that, sir. The next time we are faced, we are going to sit down, and I would love to talk baseball. Gosh. Yeah, I got you back to Jeff Burrows. He played several years with the Braves.
Yes.
So loved watching him play. And oh man. I don't want to end on that story. I got some other stuff to talk about, but I mean,
go ahead.
That's as good as it gets. Oh my gosh. I wasn't expecting a Nolan Ryan story. I was just, yeah, I saw him pitch. That's great, Vernon. All right, buddy. Well, let me, since you're a baseball guy, I haven't asked this. I know you've watched some of the podcast. A little bit about yourself. So I'll start off with my go-to. Footloose or Dirty Dancing as a movie for you? Which one do you prefer?
Dirty Dancing.
Dirty Dancing. Okay. Anything in particular on that or no?
Yeah, no. I just liked it better.
Yep. Okay. Okay. This is one I haven't asked anybody, but I thought about it before we started talking tonight. Field of Dreams, Major League, or The Sandlot? Put them in order that you like them.
Field of Dreams, Major League, and Sandlot.
Okay.
And only, there's not a hair's difference between any of them because they're all great baseball movies. But I just absolutely love Field of Dreams, and the fact that one of the protagonists is Shoeless Joe Jackson, who I still think ought to be reinstated and put in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Absolutely. That's the same order I put them in when I wrote them down. Field of Dreams, probably one of my top 10 movies of all time, but baseball movies. It's head and shoulders above the rest. And there's a bunch of others, Kevin Costner ones also, but I'm a sucker for a baseball movie. If you put it out there, I'm going to watch it. Don't care. And Major League was fun. It's a comedy, obviously, but I really enjoyed that one also. Let's see what else.
Let me interrupt you. I'm gonna throw two baseball stories at you.
Okay.
Kevin Costner also made a movie called Bull Durham, which I'm sure
you've
seen, about life in the minor leagues in baseball. And there's one scene where they're all meet at the pitcher's mound, and they're talking about everything except baseball. And they're talking about somebody's got a hex on his glove, and they need to sacrifice a live chicken. They don't know what to get one of the other players for their wedding present. And then, they're dealing with a lot of crap. And you wouldn't believe, I'm not so sure about today's, but back then, a lot of the mound meetings were just exactly like that. Not about you need to pitch this guy here or pitch that guy here or whatever, this, that, and the other. But going out and going, as a bad boy, you got to go out and be involved in some of it just because you were taking something to somebody. And that's the kind of thing a lot of them were talking about back in those days. There was a time when a minor league pitcher was called up to the Rangers when Billy Martin was still there, and he was pitching, and Billy Martin told the pitching coach, Art Fowler at the time, to go out and talk to him. So Art did, and it was one of those deals where one of the other players needed a batting glove or something of that nature, or wanted a towel to wipe the sweat off, so I took it out. And when Art Fowler got out there, the new pitcher, and I'm not going to mention any names, but he asked him, he said, "Coach, what am I doing wrong?" And he said, "Wrong? I'll tell you what you're doing wrong. You're pissing Billy Martin off. That's what you're doing wrong." And turn around and walk back to the dugout.
Oh, God, I couldn't imagine playing for Billy Martin. Oh my gosh.
And like I said, I've got hours of stories that I could tell. So anytime you're ready, just let me know.
Yes, sir. I absolutely will do that. Oh my gosh. I got to remember. And I even wrote Boulder. I've got to go back. I've watched it 5 times, but it's been so long since I've seen it. Now, Field of Dreams is off the charts. I don't know how many times I've watched that. Born and raised in Texas. I ask everybody this too. Given the choice, beach, mountains, deserts, or plains, where would you be?
Mountains are where I'm at right now. Now then, what I want to do is win the $1 billion lottery where I could have a house in Red River, but I'd still go back to Texas during the cooler, milder months.
So you just finished up at USA West.
Yes.
I've heard of that. I've never been able to make it out that way to dance or anything. What do you have coming up for the rest of the year? Anything big? I mean, I know you have your club dances and all that. What do you have coming up?
Well, I'm probably going to get in trouble, but I don't schedule anything big or anything away from probably the 1st of September until after January, because being a Texan, and we like our hunting, and that's hunting season. And so most days, more often than not, you'll catch me down at the deer lease, whether I'm hunting or not, because I'll be sitting down there just watching, catching up on sleep. I do some fantastic cooking while I'm there, and waiting for the daughter and the grandkids to get down, because on the weekends, just to entertain them. Then I still do the club dates and that kind of thing, but unless it's just something really spectacular during the week or on the weekends, now that's where you're going to find me.
I like that even better than telling me about dances. I didn't know you were a hunter like that. We've got more to talk about.
Live and breathe.
We need to go hunting and talk baseball, and once the sun goes down. That's what we need to do.
That would work.
Gosh, Vernon, this is the reason I started doing the podcast, because I told you beforehand, I get to hear a lot of stories and talk to guys, whether we're at a convention or it's a weekend that we run into each other. And I get out and do a little bit of traveling. Other callers don't. Other dancers don't. They just dance locally, and that's fine. But people like all of us callers, you, with these stories that they don't know about, nobody knows. You know, if somebody outside of Texas hires Vernon Jones for a dance, they come in, they go, wow, that guy's really fun. I had a lot of fun dancing to him. He's great calling on. But they don't know the baseball stuff and things like that. And there's a dancer out there that's going to be like, wow, that's an awesome story. That's why I started doing it. So the stuff that I know about people, other callers and dancers find out. And I did not know. I knew you were a baseball guy. We've talked about that a couple of times. Didn't know about the hunting and all that. Didn't know you were born and raised in Texas. That's great. I don't think I've ever met anybody actually born and raised in Texas until now. So that's good. I know there's plenty out there, and it's a badge of honor. I will say that everybody I've ever talked to like that, being born in the Lone Star State, and so.
Well, thank you. I enjoy it, and I've been to other places and lived for just a few months in different places for different jobs and that kind of thing. But I can't imagine living anywhere else. I don't need to.
That's great. Well, Vernon, what I'm trying to think after the new year, what we knew we have CALLERLAB coming up. I'll definitely get to see you at CALLERLAB.
Sure.
And national convention and all that. But I'll give you a call. We're going to figure out a time that we can spend together. We'll talk a little bit more baseball if it's before the national convention or CALLERLAB. That's for sure.
Okay. That'd be great. That'd be great. I will say, after January, when the hunting season is over with, coming up in February, we have the top of the line square dance cruise that I'm looking forward to.
That is where we're going to sit down, sir. I am all logged in to dance on that, so we are going to sit down and talk baseball and do the other things that we normally do after a dance. So
there we go. We'll have plenty of time on it, because frankly, I just absolutely love cruises. If you can't have fun on a cruise, you're just dead. Yep. Those one of those things that you can do as much as you want to or as little as you want to. And I'll be honest with you, frankly, I don't have any desire to get off at the ports. I might get off at one, but being on the cruise ship is all I want to do, and it's enjoyable. So yeah, pick a day when we have time, and I'd love to sit down and talk.
Absolutely. Yeah, we my wife and I, we've taken several cruises, not square dance cruises, just cruises. We started doing that after our son got grown and we were looking for other things to do. Really enjoy the cruises. And then when I heard about this top of the line one coming, I was like, man, I saw these callers and I saw this flyer. Like, sign me up for that. So I'm definitely going to go on that. So that's good. We'll get together.
I think the last time I got a notification from Jack Gladys, we had 75 squares on it.
Mm-hmm. I know it's the biggest boat out there right now, but we're going to fill it up pretty good with square dancing and square dancers. So we will definitely talk then. And good luck to you with hunting season coming. What's the hunting season run in Texas?
Archery season, which is the only thing I use,
Okay.
bow and arrow, starts October 1, and we'll be able to hunt whitetail deer and other game until about the middle of January.
Okay. Well, good luck in the hunting season. That's fantastic. That's good stuff. Vernon, it has been a pleasure, sir. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Anything else we didn't talk about?
Oh, well, there's a tons of things we didn't talk about.
I know.
Different we could go, but you know, the whole basis and genesis of this podcast and why we're here is square dancing, and it's a great activity. And I'm going to say that right, you know, we all recognize that square dancing is down. Mm-hmm. We were hoping that after COVID, we'd get this notification that we could turn the switch back on and everybody would come back. Well, that's just certainly not happened. Everybody has not come back. And if we're ever going to be able to enjoy any kind of boom, anything resembling anything close to the days gone by, is that we're going to have to rebuild from the bottom up. And that's teaching new dancers and getting them in and catering to them and giving them what they want, not necessarily what we want. It's just one of those things, Charlie, you know, and I said this in one of my CALLERLAB chairman speeches, is that what do we wish to be remembered for? There's going to be many callers, some of the top names, and we know what they'll be remembered for. But right now, we have a large task ahead of us, and that's rebuilding square dancing to where it was, or just better than it is now. And I believe that we can do that, but we're all going to have to work at it. But what do we want to be remembered for? Do we want to be remembered as the generation that said, oh, gee, square dancing's down, so I'm just going to milk it for everything I can, and when it goes away, I don't care anymore? Or do we want to be remembered as the generation that saw a problem, fixed the problem, and brought it back?
That's strong, Vernon. That's an outstanding point of view, and I agree wholeheartedly. I certainly want to see those days gone by come back again that I didn't get to enjoy. I was on the back end of that, really. And you, sir, are an ambassador of that. I will give you that. And I've learned a little bit more about you tonight, and I look forward to learning some more about you and talking to you. Vernon, it has been a true pleasure, sir. I knew about the square dance, some of the square dance stuff in your life, some of the other things I didn't. I couldn't be happier with tonight. It was a pleasure talking to you, Vernon. Good luck, break a leg, whatever you want to say on the rest of your week in New Mexico calling. And have a good call. And if I don't talk to you before, sir, good luck in hunting season. And I will see you in February for sure.
All right, Charlie. And it's been an explicit pleasure. I've enjoyed every minute of it. And maybe we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely, Vernon. I'll talk to you soon, brother.
All right. Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah, man. Bye.